Anya, let's be absolutely clear. You are, without a doubt, the most disruptive factor this firm has ever faced. Your ideas are, well, they're too emotional for business. My brother, Marcus Sterling, CEO-in-waiting of Sterling Global Engineering, delivered the hook with the controlled, dismissive sigh of a man burdened by necessary honesty. We were standing in the quiet, mahogany-paneled boardroom of the family firm, the scene set for my annual ritualistic failure to gain funding or recognition. My name is Anya Sterling. I am 33 years old. The emotional label was their catch-all dismissal for every decision I had ever made that prioritized human intuition, psychological insight, or ethical design over cold, quantifiable profit. I possessed a master's in behavioral economics and ran a small, struggling consultancy focused on human-centric design, a field my family treated as corporate astrology. The context and character intro was rooted in the unshakable certainty of the Sterling men. My father, Arthur Sterling, 65, founded Sterling Global, a massive, highly respected firm specializing in infrastructure and defense contracting. Arthur was the embodiment of logic, stern, numerical, and entirely lacking in patience for anything he couldn't model in a spreadsheet. Marcus, 36, was a carbon copy, a sharp-suited, highly logical engineer who treated empathy as a variable to be ignored. Their world was built on tangible, measurable reality, steel, concrete, and market risk assessment. The background conflict had festered for a decade. I was the lone creative in a sea of engineers. When I presented my first major idea, a system for predicting user adoption rates based on psychological friction, Arthur dismissed it with a single, brutal sentence. Feelings don't secure government contracts. Anya, quantifiable metrics do. I had been seeking a seed investment of a modest $200,000 from the family trust for my startup, Nexus Dynamics, for the last 3 years. Every pitch ended the same way. The current event trigger was the annual Sterling Global Strategic Review, a private session meant to allocate investment capital and confirm Marcus's ascendancy. My pitch was wedged between two presentations on concrete reinforcement alloys. Arthur sat at the head of the long table, not meeting my eyes, simply gesturing toward my slide deck. Go on, Anya, make it quick. We have a 5-year projection for the rail tender to discuss. I launched into my pitch, feeling the familiar internal burn of having to translate human complexity into their language of profit. Nexus Dynamics isn't selling software. We're selling compliance and adoption. The cost of non-compliance in government contracts, especially regarding PII and accessibility, is enormous. Our unique behavioral modeling system reduces psychological friction for the end user, ensuring full, ethical compliance and maximizing system adoption. This isn't just about feelings, Father. It's about eliminating human error risk, which, as your risk assessment models show, is always the most volatile variable. I pointed to a detailed slide showing a projected $4 million saving in user training and compliance penalties over 5 years. Marcus snorted, pushing his glasses up his nose. Anya, that $4 million saving is theoretical. It relies on variables we cannot control: user goodwill, psychological comfort. This is soft science. We need hard numbers. We are engineers, not life coaches. Our risk assessment model shows that 85% of long-term contract penalties stem from poor user interface design and lack of ethical auditing. I argued, my voice tight. We are addressing that structural weakness. Arthur finally looked up, closing my pitch deck folder with a heavy thud. The answer is no, Anya. We admire your passion, but this isn't a sustainable model for investment. We have core competencies: steel, concrete, logistics. You specialize in corporate handholding. We cannot risk capital on non-quantifiable metrics. We need certainty. The humiliation scene was complete. They had dismissed my life's work as corporate handholding and soft science. Marcus then stood, offering the final crushing blow, addressed directly to my father, but meant entirely for me. Father, let's put this soft science concept in perspective. Sterling Global is currently bidding on Project Sentinel, the $10 billion national security data infrastructure contract. That requires unparalleled technical precision, speed, and logical architecture. If we won that, that would be a core investment. That is quantifiable certainty. What Anya is offering is nice for a small non-profit, but it is too emotionally volatile for real business. Arthur nodded, rising from the table. Exactly. Project Sentinel is our future, not user adoption rates. The meeting is adjourned. Anya, enjoy your hobby. I walked out of that boardroom, the sound of the engineers immediately launching into their rail tender discussion fading behind me. The shame was a familiar weight, but this time it was laced with a chilling, cold clarity. They had just named their future, and in doing so, had exposed their greatest vulnerability. The secret bid in Project Sentinel. I didn't go home. I went straight to my cramped, overheated loft office and locked the door. The familiar sting of too emotional had been replaced by a furious, calculated resolve. Marcus had mentioned Project Sentinel, and now I knew exactly what I had to do. Project Sentinel was the holy grail of defense contracts, a massive, decade-long initiative to build the secure national public-facing portal for all non-classified national security data. It was technologically complex, but my years of studying government contracting taught me one thing. The modern defense contract is defined not by how well the system works, but by how well the system complies, and how easily the public adopts it. I pulled up the Sentinel RFP request for proposal. The technical specifications were brutal. Encryption, redundancy, speed. Marcus and Arthur were right. Sterling Global's technical capacity was unmatched. They would focus 95% of their proposal on the logical architecture. But my eyes scanned the compliance and ethical design sections, sections C4 and E2. The requirements were revolutionary. Mandatory behavioral science review, mandatory inclusion of psychological friction assessments, and a required 40% weighting on citizen user adoption and trust metrics. The RFP explicitly warned that firms relying solely on engineering metrics would be disqualified. Arthur's dismissal of feelings was exactly what would cost them the contract. The government wasn't building a tank. They were building a bridge of trust between citizens and data, and that required empathy. It required emotion. My work, the corporate hand-holding that Marcus mocked, was suddenly the core competence. I made a monumental decision. I would pursue Project Sentinel myself. I immediately called my two most trusted partners, Dr. Elena Ramirez, a specialist in global compliance frameworks, and David Chen, a brilliant software engineer who had become disillusioned with corporate logic. I swore them both to absolute secrecy. "This is Project Sentinel," I told them, pacing my small office. "It's impossible. We're tiny, we have no political capital, and we have zero engineering capacity compared to the giants. But the RFP is written for us. It's written for human-centric design. Sterling Global will fail, because they can't even perceive the compliance requirements." We worked in a black box for 4 straight months. We lived on coffee, takeout, and the pure adrenaline of audacious ambition. I liquidated every personal savings account, took out a second mortgage on my loft, and poured every cent into hiring specialized legal counsel to ensure our RFP was airtight. I kept Nexus Dynamics running normally during the day, maintaining the illusion of my small, innocuous consultancy, while every night we were secretly bidding on the largest contract in national history. My section was the most critical: the Anya protocol. It was a proprietary system for designing user interfaces based on psychological safety. We modeled thousands of citizen scenarios, creating a system that didn't just protect data, it actively built trust in the data, ensuring high adoption rates even among vulnerable populations. The exact mandate of Section E2. My years of analyzing feelings were finally being valued. Marcus called once during this period, completely unaware of the pressure I was under. "Anya, I need your team to run some sensitivity analyses on the rail contract," he demanded. "Just a quick weekend job. You should be able to turn it around fast. You aren't busy with that user comfort stuff, are you?" "My schedule is currently booked solid with a highly confidential project, Marcus," I replied, my voice cool and professional. "I'll have to decline. You'll need to rely on Sterling Global's internal team." His ensuing frustration was music to my ears. He complained to Arthur, who called my mother, who called me, demanding I prioritize family business over my petty scheduling conflicts. I endured the emotional pressure, knowing the price of their ignorance was about to be astronomical. We submitted the Nexus Dynamics proposal, a sleek, compact 300-page document that looked insignificant next to Sterling Global's likely 3,000-page engineering binder. But every page of ours addressed the core of the RFP: human trust and ethical compliance. The waiting period was agonizing. For 6 weeks we heard nothing. Sterling Global, meanwhile, launched their massive, public-facing marketing campaign for Project Sentinel, full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, lavish lobbying efforts, and a continuous stream of Marcus's confident, logical sound bites about technical dominance, the revelation and the collapse. The climax began not with a phone call, but with a sudden, panicked summons. I was in my loft office when my personal line, a number only the family used, rang. It was Arthur. His voice was frantic, shredded by pure, unadulterated terror. "Anya, you need to get to the firm right now." "It's a disaster." "What is it, Father?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer. "The Sentinel bid. We've been disqualified. They sent the formal notice an hour ago. We don't understand why. We had the best technical score, the highest metrics. They said our proposal was structurally non-compliant." I drove to the Sterling Global headquarters, the polished granite fortress of their logic, my face a mask of professional concern. The scene inside the boardroom was chaos. Arthur and Marcus were screaming at a team of bewildered lawyers and engineers. "They said we failed the user adoption and ethical compliance review," Marcus shouted, slamming the disqualification notice down on the table. "They called our PII protection methods psychologically insufficient and ethically non-compliant." "What does that even mean, Father? We use the most advanced encryption available." "It means," I stated, walking into the room and retrieving the notice, my voice cutting through the panic, "that you failed to address the human element. You used logic to solve a trust problem. Your encryption was flawless, but your design caused psychological friction, which violates the C4 and E2 mandates. Your technical dominance was irrelevant, because your system design failed the ethical review." Arthur stared at me, desperation overriding his anger. "Anya, you know this. You understand their jargon. You need to fix this. We have a mandatory appeal meeting with the Procurement Review Board in 48 hours. You need to lead the appeal." Marcus, broken by failure, looked at me, pleading, "Please, Anya. We know you understand the soft science. Tell them they're wrong. Use your emotional intelligence to smooth this over." The humiliation scene reversal was now upon them. They were begging the person they had scorned for the exact skills they had dismissed. "I can't lead your appeal, Marcus," I said, leaning over the table, my gaze cold and unyielding. "Because the terms of your disqualification are absolute. And more importantly, I am contractually bound to the winning bidder." Arthur frowned, the last shred of his former authority tightening his face. "The winning bidder? Who is it? Who could possibly beat Sterling Global on technical metrics?" "Technical metrics are irrelevant, Father," I said, finally revealing the core truth. "The winner was judged on trust, compliance, and user adoption. The winner solved the human problem." I placed a newly minted federal document on the table, stamped with the official seal and the massive $10 billion contract value. "The winner," I announced, meeting the horrified, stunned gaze of my entire family, "is Nexus Dynamics. I won Project Sentinel." The effect was instantaneous and physically violent. Marcus stumbled backward into a chair. Arthur grabbed the contract, his hands shaking so badly he could barely focus on the names. The room was silent, the air vibrating with the shock of a power shift so immense it defied corporate logic. You bid against us?" Arthur whispered, the betrayal so deep it sounded like a wound. "I bid on the contract that was written for my exact skill set," I corrected him. "You dismissed my work as a hobby and corporate hand-holding. I liquidated everything I owned and bet on my ability to meet the ethical mandate you couldn't even perceive. Your failure to integrate emotion into your proposal was the structural weakness that allowed me to win. This is revenge," Marcus shouted, his hands balled into fists. "You stole our future out of spite." "No, Marcus," I said, placing my hand on the official contract. "I secured my future with professional competence, and as the primary federal contractor, my immediate professional duty is to ensure Project Sentinel is successful. That means I cannot allow a major subcontractor like Sterling Global, a firm that demonstrated a failure to prioritize ethical and compliance mandates, to operate unchecked." I pulled out a prepared Nexus Dynamics legal document, an operational audit. "As of this moment, as a mandatory condition of the Sentinel contract, I am initiating a full binding compliance audit and restructuring plan for Sterling Global. If you wish to subcontract any piece of the $10 billion Project Sentinel, which, given your disqualification, is your only path to solvency, you must submit to my full operational authority." I looked at Arthur, the defeated titan. Your logical, unfeeling approach cost you the contract. My emotional, human-centric approach is now the only thing that can save your firm from the resulting financial collapse. You need me, Father, not as your daughter, but as your new, absolute operational director. The long consequence. The ethical overlord. The aftermath of the Sentinel revelation was not just a corporate takeover. It was a psychological reckoning. Arthur and Marcus were forced to watch, helpless, as the emotional intelligence they had scorned became the cornerstone of their survival. The corporate reversal. The submission. Sterling Global, facing immediate liquidity crises from the disqualified bid, was left with no choice but to accept my terms. I became the de facto CEO and operational director, forcing them to adopt the very soft science methods they despised. Marcus's fate. The hardest blow fell on Marcus. I didn't fire him. I made him head of user empathy and compliance training. He was forced to personally lead workshops explaining psychological friction and ethical PII handling to his former engineering peers. The man who scorned emotion was now professionally bound to preach its gospel. His authority was gone, replaced by forced servitude to my vision. Arthur's fate. Arthur was allowed to keep his founder title, but his desk was moved to a small cubicle in the compliance wing, the quiet, meticulous domain he always ignored. He spent his days watching engineers grapple with user behavior metrics and accessibility protocols, the tangible proof of his outdated thinking. His greatest punishment was having to call me, the CEO, for approval to purchase even the smallest new piece of engineering equipment. The emotional reckoning, Eleanor's breakdown. My mother, Eleanor, tried one final desperate maneuver, attempting to leverage the emotional trauma. She cornered me after a mandatory board meeting. Anya, you have ruined your brother. You have humiliated your father. We are family. Where is your compassion? Where is your heart? My heart, mother, I replied, my voice steady, is exactly where it should be, focused on ethical governance and strategic stability. You told me I was too emotional for business. You are now witnessing an operation run with absolute professional detachment. You confused my capacity for feeling with a lack of professional strength. I am correcting your error. I made a chilling, definitive statement. My ethics demand I save the thousands of jobs at Sterling Global, but they do not demand I offer compassion to the individuals who nearly destroyed it. That is the new logical reality you must accept. The final victory, the gala replay. 5 years later, Sterling Global had merged with Nexus Dynamics to become Nexus Sentinel Global, a firm recognized not only for its engineering prowess, but for its unmatched ethical compliance record. The firm was debt-free, thriving, and structurally sound. The annual strategic review was held again, but this time in a brand new headquarters I had commissioned. Arthur and Marcus were present, wearing the quiet humility of those who have been professionally defeated and spiritually chastened. I, the CEO, stood before the board and the employees, the true leadership material. Marcus delivered the final operational report. His voice measured, his language entirely focused on user adoption metrics and psychological safety benchmarks. He performed his role flawlessly, entirely subservient to my vision. When Marcus finished, he looked at me, the CEO. Anya, the Q3 compliance projections are green across the board. The Nexus protocol has reduced human error risk to 0.1%. Excellent work, Marcus, I replied, nodding formally. You're finally learning the value of soft science. Arthur approached me after the session. He looked old, but there was a quiet, almost fearful respect in his eyes. Anya, he admitted, I was wrong. The government needed trust, not just steel. Your way was the right way. Your emotions were the best investment we ever made. My empathy was my strategic advantage, Father, I corrected him. And the $10 billion contract was the proof. I concluded the day by walking out to the grand lobby, where a camera crew from a major news network was waiting to interview me about the firm's successful ethical transition. Ms. Sterling, the reporter asked, holding the microphone toward me. Your critics once said you were too emotional for this high-stakes business. What is your response to that now? I looked directly into the camera, giving my final, unassailable answer. My greatest strength was always my empathy, I stated. I understood that every system, no matter how complex, ultimately serves a human being. The people who called me too emotional simply lack the emotional intelligence to realize that in modern business, Empathy is the only metric that truly guarantees success. They thought feelings were a weakness. I used them to secure the future. The cameras flashed. The interview concluded and I walked away, leaving the former architects of Sterling Global to watch their daughter, the emotional anomaly, redefine the meaning of leadership and success in the vast, complex world they once believed only belonged to them. I had achieved the importance they denied me, not through logic, but through the profound, unyielding power of the human heart.